Hello, and welcome to my backyard. One of my good friends, Thomas Urso, is a mediator for various sword groups, and we talk about the interesting thing many groups do. There are many groups out there, classical groups, traditional groups, and of course eclectic groups. And he posed this to me: if I could work with some of these groups and create a short tutorial. And I said, why not? Because I was taught in Japan through the Japanese Department of Education and Recreation, and they stated anybody can learn the sword if you want to. So there are no restrictions. What I'd like you to understand, though, is the sword is not as difficult as it appears. It's more that you're putting too much effort, but not enough focus into the different techniques. Of course, it'd be very easy if you just went to your local school and you could learn swording. But the difficult part arises is that many of the people out there don't have access to a school nor a teacher. Therefore, I will show you how to do a few techniques that will give you a nice guideline to start from. Today, I'm going to use a regular sword, a stamped steel sword. This isn't that great of a sword, so don't think that I'm using something great and you need to too. Although this will cut your hand off, but as you can see, it is just your average classic blade, and it's full of different nicks and bruises and blemishes, just to let you know that you can use most any sword out there. What I'd also like you to know is that it doesn't have to be razor sharp. So then again, when you're practicing these techniques we're going to work on, I'd like you to know that relax, keep the sword pointed forward, and don't try to muscle in the cut. Because today, we're going to be cutting something very interesting. When I practice test cutting, I usually hang around what they call Japanese tatami mats. Those are the rice stalks that are woven up on top of the flooring, so Japanese people have their tatami mats in that type of flooring. That is readily available over in Japan, and you could test cut all day long, every day, 365 days a year. Although in Western countries, such as here in the United States, it's harder to find those tatami mats without a lot of cost. Moreover, when people live in rural areas, they have a tendency to use what they have, because that's the way life is in most cases. Most people in this day and age who are cutting into the backyard like I am now have a tendency to use something very easy to find. Those are water bottles. Therefore, I'm going to start there. At first, I thought that cutting water bottles would be not very classical and my teachers would frown upon it. But then again, in this era, in this day and age, in your locale, anything works. Let me take the sword out now, and I'm going to take the sheath and I'm going to put it down, because when you cut in the backyard, you don't really need to use the sheath because we're not doing any classical or traditional iaido or aijutsu. Now, with sword in hand and your sheath stowed away somewhere, I want you to look at how and what is the best way to cut. At the very beginning, you need a stand. Now, everybody has their own stand in one way or another. What I have discovered while watching some of your videos is that you usually use a tabletop or something like a 4x4, which is really great. Although the wider the table is, the less exact the cuts will be, and you have a chance of taking the sword and cutting it into that other object, thus bending or chipping the sword. What I'd like you to look at is, why don't you use a piece of 4x4? Now, there's different ways you can use it. One is you can make a stand, or you can dig a post hole and put the wood into the post hole and work it that way. Works in very, very nicely. Here's another thought. What is the best size to cut from? Or what is the best height we need to cut from? When we're dealing with regular tatami mat, a lot of the time, the top of the tatami mat should come to the individual's eyes within a few centimeters, for example. Although, dealing with water bottles, what's your best base to work off of? And that is, why don't we all work from our waist? Because when we hold the sword out like this, It's off of our waist. Therefore, if we hold the sword relaxed like this, and our base is relaxed in that area, we don't have to overreach anything when we cut. We don't have to cut up too high or cut down too low. That allows you to not focus as well as you could. So after you've cut off a length of 4x4 or 4x6 or whatever that is about waist high, then a lot of people take and they get a water bottle. And they take the water bottle and they put it right on top, which is very, very good. It's easy, allows you to get in there and put a lot of snap in. But at the very beginning, most students don't have that snap and they can't put it through a water bottle. Moreover, a lot of times they want to stack bottles on top of each other, and trying to stack them up on top of the top here isn't that easy. Here's something to alleviate that problem. Take a drill and drill about a 1-inch wide hole, about 1 inch down deep into your wood base, and now you'll be able to take the bottle and press it down in there just like that, which will allow you a little stronger base to cut from, which is very, very good, because I don't want you over swinging. These bottles aren't very strong to cut, as I mentioned earlier. Therefore, you don't need to swing up really hard and cut down like you're cutting through an elephant's leg. What I like to do now is set up a good, strong focal point and foundation to work off of. Off on the side here, I would bring the blade not in the middle here, but over here where the monouchi is. This is called the sweet spot area. This is where your best cutting will be at this time in your training or in this tutorial. If I come around this way, and you can see my legs and my arms, they're just here, relaxed and ready to go. If I bring the sword back around this way in the middle, you can see that I'll just put it against the side here. How far do I need to move the sword away from the bottle before I cut it? A lot of people get here and they chirp it this way. A lot of people get up here like this and they swing down very, very hard. The problem is with lifting up high and swinging down, your shots and your cuts won't be consistent. And since you're not cutting tatami mats, it isn't that fun. So what I suggest, and as if you look closer here, is that I'm going to take the sword like this. I'm just going to turn my hands like that just a tad. I'm not pulling the blade out. What I'm doing is I'm just angling it off to the side here. And this will give this enough distance to cut through here. The secret is that you don't want to lift it up and cut, is you want to be able to wring the handle. Wring the handle is very important. Of course, we can not wring the handle and cut through. But if you wring the handle correctly, all the power from the ring goes to the tip of the blade and you'll be able to cut much better and smoother. So, for example, if I bring the blade straight down this as your focal point, find out where it is, and then I just turn my arms a tad, keeping my elbows close to my chest. Because now we're doing minute cuts and we don't need to lift our elbows up as much. Because remember, it's all about the sword cutting and not how we look. So stand up tall, turn the blade slightly like that, put your shibori in. Now don't keep rubbing your hands like this. What's going to happen is you're going to find a comfortable part and it's not going to cut well. Bring your hands down, ring them in, your right hand going counterclockwise, your left hand going clockwise, into each other this way, hold it there, and then bring the sword in like this, hold it there, and cut that way. You notice that my sword didn't go too far. I don't need to go past this. If I swung hard enough where I'm down here like this, if someone was around, it wouldn't be safe. Second of all, I'm putting in too much pressure for the cut. After you learn to take a cut like this and apply it in sort of like a micro burst, where your twitch memory works in with your shibori or your ringing, and then you can keep all the cuts short, sweet, and pert. Later down the road, when you're cutting something a little stronger, like a bigger bottle, maybe you want to pull out a little bit more. Let's go over this again. Now, if we look again at this angle, you can see with the camera basically over my shoulder, all I do is I turn my hands over here to the angle. Watch it again. I take it, I hold it straight down, and I turn the angle this way where the blade just comes up. That easy. I don't have to move my arms, even on this side. I don't have to move my arms. I don't have to move my grip. And then when I execute a cut, watch how easy it is. I lift it up and I cut down. That simple. I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to bring up another bottle. I'm going to set it in like this. Now I'm going to go over to the other side and just turn the blade over like that and see where the blade goes. Again, keep it nice and consistent. Let's go on to the next bottle and the next angle. Now before, we are coming down in the hidari migi keisegiri, which means a downward diagonal cut from the top right to the left and from the my top left to the right. Yours will be opposite. Now what we'll do is we're going to bring it up here, find our focal point, making sure again that the blade is where it should be in relation to your body. Walk back this way, and now I'm going to turn the blade this way a tad. You notice my hands aren't moving. Look at this again. I'm just turning it that way. That's all I'm doing. Especially where the monouchi is or the sweet spot. I bring it back to there, and that's just enough room to generate a good cut for this type of bottle. And now you notice it jumped out a little bit. Sometimes that will happen. Just make sure that you put a little bit more shiboru or a little bit more ringing on the blade, and it will cut through without it popping out. For example, let's try it again. I take the bottle, I bring it in, I turn it this way, and now with a little bit more pressure and a little bit more oomph, I'm going to ring it and cut. See the difference? It went from hitting the whole bottle and thudding over and everything falling out to a nice, proper, smooth cut. So I must stress on you, it isn't the strength, it's the wrist action and technique you need to properly cut through something as simple as a bottle full of water. Now remember, I've never really cut bottles of water that much just because where I learned test cutting, it was mostly bamboo and tatami mats. Let's go on to a different angle. This time, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I'm going to bring it over here on this side. I'm just going to turn my hands where the blade will be parallel to the floor and flat. And then, with a little bit of shibori, I sit there and cut through. Did you notice I missed? This is another important aspect where people have a problem cutting bottles or other objects. They took their eyes off the object and their cut wasn't where they wanted to place it. You have to remember that you have to keep your eyes on exactly where the cut is and not try to just throw it in there blindly. You got to give it 100% of your undivided attention. Therefore, when you do bring it up over here and you do turn it on its side, and then when you do cut, it cuts nice, smooth, and the nice thing about it is, again, you're making safe cuts within the parameters of what you need to. Another angle I'd like you to think about is going upward in a diagonal way. So, bringing the sword down like back where we were, I'm dropping it down a little bit. Now you notice it has a little bit more room to come up with. I'm going to turn it up a little bit tighter this way. So now, when I shiboru or I ring the blade upwards, and again, you're going to want to adjust your hands about right here. And I assume, after you cut a couple of bottles, your hands are damp and wet, and you might be using a cotton or leather thong or whatever. Well, remember that don't readjust. So here it is here. My hands are nice and tight. I bring it and turn my wrist down and elbows, and now I can cut up this way really easy. You notice my parameter is from here to here. And the reason why again is, you might as well do it correctly the first time instead of being overzealous about swinging and it fly out of your hands and you stick a tree, if you know what I mean. Let's try another angle. Now over on this side, I'm going to just do the opposite. I'm going to bring it back over the monouchi, the sweet spot. I'm going to just turn my hands downward until the sword comes up this way. You'll find out though, you'll feel a little convoluted and you'll feel like your hands are really constrained right here. And then you're going to drop your shoulder and look like you're eating a taco. Hey, it all feels that way. But if it feels good, it's a bad habit. You have to readjust the muscles and everything in your hands and your arms to accommodate the sword. And that is, you bring it down here a little bit more, and then this way, you just cut up. You notice though, I was talking when I cut. That's another important thing. You've always seen in the movies, if someone is talking while they have a gun on somebody, usually chances are they can't take the shot very well. Same thing with the sword. If you're talking, you really can't cut as well. That is why you want a nice strong ki, or if you're in a backyard and you don't want to hear anybody go, or you don't want to hear people hear you say, "Wah!" or yell, or ki, or men, or do, or anything like that, just keep it quiet. But keep your nose onto the target. So even though this is cut once, I'm going to come through, watch on the target, and stop talking. You can see the difference now and how strong the cut looks compared to where I wasn't giving it my 100% focus and attention. Let's cut a little bit more on the side. Again, I'm going to bring it over here on this side, and makes it really easy that way, doesn't it? But let's start thinking of something a little bit more interesting. A lot of people who do cut bottles, they want to start using 2 or 3 bottles at a time, which is fine. And that's why if you put this up here like this, it'll give you a little bit more foundation in the base. So if you do, come in here like this, turn it like that, and cut that down, and then after you finish that cut, a lot of everybody else wants to swing it around and come back up. After you finish that cut, you just turn the blade 180 degrees, and then you cut up. It's that simple. Actually, it isn't that simple. It takes a little bit more practice than you see here, but nevertheless, you can keep your cuts very, very tight, and after you've cut dozens and dozens and dozens of bottles like this in the little parameter guideline that I gave you, then you can go on to multi-bottles that are across it, because now you'll know how to put the energy behind the blade, ring the handle, having the right trajectory and angle of cut, which are very, very important. I hope this short tutorial helps on helping you focus and the parameters you need to simply cut a bottle without putting in too much effort and creating a dangerous situation. Again, welcome to my backyard and have a great day.